All right, well, our topic today, the state of the Democratic Party and the possible contenders for 2020. We'll assess that from the opposition point of view. Yes, it's already starting. The next presidential race is starting to come into view. A number of Democrats are lining up and testing the waters. It's of special interest right here in Massachusetts. We have no less than 3 potential candidates. Of course, there's Elizabeth Warren. Our guest from America Rising, Alex, is very familiar with her. We also have 2 others making noises, Congressman Seth Moulton of the North Shore, and, of course, former Governor Deval Patrick putting out feelers that he might be interested in running. And one thing, though, that I've learned from all these years covering politics here, and I'll tell Alex this, never discount a candidate from Massachusetts. We've done that before, but 3 of the last 8 presidential elections have featured a nominee from Massachusetts: Michael Dukakis in 88, John Kerry in 04, Mitt Romney in 2012. None of them won, of course, but we do tend to churn out the nominees and the losers here. So anyway, let's get right to our guest now. Alexander Smith is the new executive director of the America Rising PAC, one of the leading Republican opposition research PACs in the country. They're going to play a big role in Elizabeth Warren's re-election campaign and also if she runs for president in 3 years. Alex, thank you very much for joining us here on Battenfeld.
Thanks so much for having me on, Joe.
Now, let's talk first about Elizabeth Warren. Tell us what your group does and what you've done. You've been sort of the bane of her existence for a while now. Tell us what the current assessment is of what she's doing. She's obviously up for re-election, running for re-election, but there's been a lot of talk about her running for president. You're tracking her very closely.
Absolutely. So earlier this year, we started our Elizabeth Warren initiative, and the main goals of the initiative is to make her life difficult during her 2018 re-election campaign, but also to develop the long-term narratives that we feel like will hurt her in 2020. So we're using various methods to do that, things like video tracking, FOIA requests, rapid response communications. This is something that we did really effectively with Hillary Clinton. America Rising was some of the first people out there writing quite literally the book on Hillary Clinton. So if you'll recall, in the beginning, a lot of the stories that popped about her outrageous taxpayer-funded speeches at colleges and universities, the shady dealings with the Clinton Foundation, a lot of them from the work produced here by our hardworking researchers at America Rising. And so, we're really committed to establishing that narrative early and often for not just Elizabeth Warren, but all of the Democratic challengers, both in 2018 and 2020.
Now, before we get to the other candidates and Elizabeth Warren in more detail, you're a millennial, I believe, correct?
Correct.
And how has I didn't know if you were there's like a cutoff point where even if you're too young now, you're not a millennial anymore, but you're right in there. And you can tell us, obviously, I've been covering campaigns for decades. I could talk a little bit about this, but how has campaigning changed in your view just in the last few years? There's been some dramatic changes, especially in digital advertising and in research. How do you work that now, and what do you do as far as research?
You're absolutely right that there has been this change. I mean, I remember back in the 2004 elections, I was in the 5th grade.
Wow.
Or sorry, the 2000 elections.
You're making me feel old, too.
Elections. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But in the 2000 elections, I was in the 5th grade, and being the little political dork that I was, I had a printout map of the United States, and I was coloring with crayons the results as they came in. And my Florida...
Wow, you're like Tim Russer.
State,
yeah.
Yes, looked very purple by the end of the night, of course. But, the digital revolution here has just truly changed the way that we look at things. So, America Rising is an opposition research firm. I think some people, when they hear opposition research, they think of dumpster divers in the dead of night.
Digging up dirt, exactly. Digging up dirt, going through the garbage, that kind of thing.
I'm not going through any trash cans.
Good.
What America Rising does is we take everything that's publicly available. So these are all things that the average citizen can access, whether it's using FOIA and other freedom of information laws in the states. to access public documents, going to public appearances and seeing what candidates are saying, watching them as they do news hits. We're really just compiling information that anyone could get. But what makes us unique is that we're using that information to develop a narrative. And so, truly with the video tracking and the kind of rapid response that we're seeing here, I mean, I would say that even over the course of my lifetime, as someone who's what I would call a middle millennial, I have just seen this transformation where information just goes so much faster, and we're able to get that information out in so many diverse ways that we weren't able to before.
Yeah, I mean, I remember obviously when the first YouTube videos came up, and that I think it was 2004 election maybe. That first started that kind of thing, and putting up videos and getting, finding, I think there were some embarrassing things that John Kerry did on video, but now they would be out within seconds. And you would be out there pushing them out on your website and to the media. And it struck me as you were talking that in some ways you filled the void of the media. As there have been so many cutbacks in the media, there's far fewer reporters working out there or just having time to do the time and the resources to do that kind of work, like sending FOIAs out and going through campaign finance records. So in some ways you're filling that void, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that what our goal here is in America Rising is certainly not to engage in any kind of smear campaign. What we want to do is provide voters with choices. And I think now, especially in 2017, more than ever, voters don't want to have buyer's remorse. They don't want to, cast their vote for a candidate, cast their precious vote, only to find out later on that candidate is embroiled in some kind of scandal. And so what we're looking to do is, again, just taking all of this publicly available
You're just doing a public service. That's all. Doing a public service.
We're humble public servants here, Joe.
No agenda at all. No, but you guys obviously you're a conservative Republican organization, and
of course.
But and as far as Elizabeth Warren goes, you've been tracking her, and some interesting divisions are coming up in the Democratic Party about her, correct?
Absolutely. So, what's interesting about Elizabeth Warren is, she doesn't have a liberal problem in Massachusetts or I dare say the rest of the country. I mean, if you look at her,
she's not too liberal for Massachusetts, I would say.
No, 86% self-identified liberals voted for her in the 2012 election. So she's doing just fine there.
Yeah.
I think where she's finding some pushback, though, nationally as she seeks to raise her profile through things like the Netroots Nation speech in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, is that she's finding pushback from centrist Dems who are sort of ringing the alarm bell and saying, hey, Elizabeth Warren, and that message that you're communicating at Netroots Nation, that works great to Netroots Nation. That might work in Massachusetts, in some corners of the state, but we can't elect Democrats in a lot of these states that are decidedly more mixed. I mean, look at the map for 2018. It's a disaster for Democrats. There are 10 Democratic senators that are up in states that Donald Trump won. 5 of those states he won by more than 20 points. And so I think what those more centrist Democrats are saying, and they're coming out in the press now, I think, as a way to sort of raise the red flag, is saying, Elizabeth Warren, those ideas work in some corners of the country. They work on the Acela corridor. So they're not going to work in other places if we want to win nationally. And obviously you've got when she comes up, when she goes for a town hall or something, do you guys show up with a camera? Yeah, I mean, we track a lot of different events. Elizabeth Warren is certainly someone of interest for us. So, yeah, we're following her appearances very closely. You consider her one of the top, I would say, possible contenders for 2020, correct? I would say so. I mean, if you look at the Democratic Party right now, which is decidedly divided, there's an entire group that Bernie Sanders very much inspired. Everyone sort of talks about 2016 being the year of populism. Well, that exists on both sides. I mean, in the Democratic Party, there was this liberal uprising that was led by Bernie Sanders. A lot of these voters felt very much disenfranchised after the 2016 elections. I think they were very dispirited, particularly because of the work of the Democratic Party establishment in costing Bernie Sanders the nomination. So you have this group of liberals. They're divided among themselves in terms of their various causes.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that at the convention, obviously flare up with the Sanders supporters clashing with the Hillary Clinton supporters.
Yep, and so, my point is, and first of all, I mean, we don't have any indication yet that Hillary Clinton isn't running again.
Oh, come on, you know that she wants to.
I know.
You know she wants to.
In her heart,
she hasn't given up.
Really
she has not given. No, she has not given up.
Well, she's now the self-proclaimed leader of the #resist movement.
Right, but I do think the whole Hillary Clinton question is going to dominate the 2020 race until she decides whether to run or not. Mm-hmm. That's going to be the main question, and it's going to determine, I think, whether a lot of people, different people, run or not as well. Because there's not going to be a whole lot of room. I mean, she's still got her loyal supporters, but it's going to cause all kinds of divisions within the party if she runs again, in my opinion. So I think the Democratic Party would be better off if she didn't run, but I don't see it. I don't see her giving up quite yet.
Sure, and then I think on that same token, we don't actually have any indications that Bernie Sanders himself isn't running.
Right, he's still out there. I was just going to ask you that the next candidate up there, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, still extremely popular within the party. I don't think he hurt himself at all in the campaign, except I think there was a little bitterness when he endorsed Hillary Clinton. When he endorsed Hillary Clinton, I think there was some unhappiness within his supporters. But overall, I think he still has high ratings in the party.
Yep, and for argument's sake, right now, let's assume that Bernie Sanders doesn't run. And now there's this whole wing of the liberal movement, the Democratic Party, that is sort of leaderless in that way. The reason why Elizabeth Warren, I think, is a top contender in terms of the Democratic nomination in 2020 is because she seems to be sort of a natural person to fill that void. But it's not going to come, interestingly, without competition. And I think that you see this through some of the younger senators like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. They've been sort of making their own overtures to this group, and it's been sort of met with mixed results. I mean, Kamala Harris recently sort of popped onto the scene.
We're talking about in case anybody didn't know, we're talking about the senator from California, Kamala Harris, who has been described as the female Barack Obama, sort of.
Mm-hmm. And so she popped onto the scene just a couple of weeks ago. She was, attending all these glitzy fundraisers in the Hamptons, and we were getting all of these sort of anonymously sourced quotes from Democratic donors fawning over her. And as soon as those stories start to pop, because, she's someone who's, I think, trying to increasingly move herself to the left on certain positions in order to capture that group, a lot of the Bernie groups actually came out and started putting out disparaging things about her.
Which is amazing to me. She's pretty liberal, and they're still unhappy with her, I guess, for, raising money from Clinton supporters, is that it? Or they're also unhappy because she was in law enforcement at one point, I think?
Yep, and her Wall Street connections as well are of suspect to these groups. But then, as I'm sort of sitting back, watching my laptop with a bowl of popcorn with these these fights, you really are
a political nerd. If that's what you do, and you get a bowl of popcorn and watch the latest political developments.
Guilty as charged.
That's all right. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome.
So this is probably one of my favorite parts of the whole struggle here is that Neera Tanden, who, if you'll remember, she is the president of the Center for American Progress, she comes out and basically alludes that any criticism of Kamala Harris and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, again, someone who's trying to make those overtures to the left, she then implies that racism is to blame in some of these Bernie Sanders group attacks on them.
Sort of like when Sanders was attacking Hillary Clinton, there was sexism involved, raised in that as well.
Yep. And so I love looking at this liberal wing because, again, Bernie Sanders isn't out. Elizabeth Warren seems to be the natural fit for the group, and she's just doubling down in it, which I think is pretty it's pretty powerless for her, her national prospects. But then, Elizabeth Warren has this competition from some of these junior senators who are then being attacked by various people in the movement because they're not liberal enough.
Liberals, they just love to fight. They love to fight. Even when there's not a fight, they just love to start a fight. I've learned that. They're sort of like Massachusetts Republicans here. But, Senator Harris, by the way, just a few days ago, I think the mayor, the former mayor of Los Angeles came out and said that, Harris is going to be knocking on doors in Iowa in 2020, and that caused a big stir in California as well, too. So she's I think, a real possibility.
Absolutely. I mean, she's definitely sort of the new darling of the Democratic donor base. But again, she's someone who is sort of caught between this vice grip that's really affecting the entire party. Anyone who's running in a 2018 Senate race, anyone who's running in a competitive House race, and anyone who's looking at 2020, is that you have these liberal donors, and you have these liberal activist groups like Indivisible and Move On and the Bernie Wing that are pushing all of these, all of these senators and various elected officials to support things like free college, and if I were writing it, I would put free in quotation marks, free college, minimum wage hikes, single payer, and, I think that with Kamala Harris, you do see some, even though she's decidedly moving to the left, there is some equivocation that's pretty interesting.
We are talking with Alex Smith of the America Rising PAC, one of the leading opposition research firms or organizations in the country. There's a Democratic side alternative sort of to your opposites in the opposition research business as well, but you America Rising has really stepped up to fill the void of becoming, and now Harris, Senator Harris, is on your group's radar as well. Who else? By the way, Senator Harris, in case you didn't know, I think she was a former district attorney up in San Francisco, fairly new, running a new junior senator, and I believe her parents are, one parent is Indian American and the other parent is Jamaican. So it is sort of a very interesting possibility that if she ran, that's why people are kind of calling her the female Barack Obama. And it'd be interesting to see if the Obama supporters flock to her, because we've also got making noises here, as you know, our former governor, Deval Patrick, stories coming out recently that he's being, quote, urged to run by some Obama people. Is Deval Patrick on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, all of these Democrats really are. Although what's interesting about Deval Patrick is that, it amuses me because what a slap in the face to Senator Warren. If the Obama people are going after Deval Patrick, trying to get him to run, and there's Senator Warren who's waging this big resist campaign all across the country. It seems to me that there's sort of an issue there within the Democratic base. And
it seemed like he was deliberately, him and his supporters were deliberately trying to get the message out to Senator Warren, hey, I might run too. So not so fast here. I think, by getting that out so early, I think they wanted to send a message. And then, of course, we also have yet another person from Massachusetts, as I mentioned before, Seth Moulton, new U.S. representative from up on the North Shore. He's going to be going out to Iowa in a few weeks, so he's raising eyebrows with that, although he says he's not running for president. They all say that. Why else would he be going to Iowa, right?
Oh, well, the Iowa Fair, I hear, is pretty good.
It is. I've actually been to the Iowa State Fair, and it is pretty fun. But I don't think that's the real reason that he may be going out to eat steak. I think it's a steak fry out there or something. But supposedly he's generating a lot of interest in kind of like the Hollywood liberal set, because he is military, was in the Army for several tours and in Iraq, Afghanistan, I believe, and so that has a certain appeal, I think, to Democrats as well. He's younger, he's new to the scene, and he's sort of developing as a leading voice against Donald Trump as well.
Sure, it's interesting. So, I mean, certainly I appreciate Representative Moulton's service, and we all thank him for what he's done for our country. But he's an interesting character, and here's why. If you look back in 2016, he wrote Nancy Pelosi, I mean, what could really only be described as a love letter. I mean, this thing was gushing. It was ridiculous, almost over the top. Oh my gosh! Thank you so much, Senator Pelosi, for putting me on the House Armed Services Committee. This has given me huge national exposure, and I get to be on TV. And,
really exciting! I get to be on the TV. Yeah, exactly. He was very gushing, I would say, is the correct word. And now, of course, he's singing a little different tune now.
Oh yeah, now he's so. I'm looking at what he was saying in a recent interview, where he's sort of parsing that letter, and he's saying, "Oh well, nowhere in there do I say that I support Nancy Pelosi for leader, or say that I appreciate her leadership."
No, I just gushed all over and said how great she was. I didn't support her because now, of course, he's one of the leaders in the House, the opposition to Pelosi, saying that they need a new minority leader in there, and he hasn't really. There's a core group, I think, of younger House members, but that hasn't really generated a lot of steam, has it? The push to remove, as far as I can tell, there's no big push on anymore to remove Pelosi.
She definitely has a grip on the Democratic Party establishment, and probably one of my favorite moments in watching the Democratic show over the last couple of months has been so when Nancy Pelosi was originally running for leader, there was, if you'll remember, there was a challenge to her by Tim Ryan of Ohio. Tim Ryan comes from Trump country in Ohio. I mean, he comes from a district that I think is one of the often profiled districts and in the media, a classic example of, sort of a Midwest Rust Belt state that, went for Trump when it had previously gone for President Obama. And so Tim Ryan, kind of puts it out there that he's going to challenge her. And Nancy Pelosi makes this ridiculous statement, in my opinion, where she says, "Why would we elect someone as leader who couldn't even carry his district for for Hillary Clinton?"
Nice.
And it's like, isn't that exactly who you should be electing as leader? Because the San Francisco area is so representative of the rest of the country.
Right. Yeah, it's like putting somebody from Boston in charge there. Very similar. But there's also another candidate out there that you're tracking too, the New York governor.
Oh, Governor Cuomo, one of my favorites.
You're going to have a lot of fun with him, I have a feeling.
Oh, we're going to have so much fun with Andrew Cuomo. So this is a guy who's definitely positioning himself to be a national figure. And unlike some of the previous figures that I've mentioned, he's someone who's really trying to play it down the middle, in my opinion. I mean, you saw earlier in the year that he draped his arm around Bernie Sanders and had the whole free college announcement in New York. So I think that was sort of his little giveaway to the left, to the progressives in New York State. But he has a huge progressive problem. I mean, he's already recruiting primary challengers against him, including Sex and the City actress Cynthia Nixon.
Oh, right.
He, potentially. And, you know, these guys, if you look at their statements from the progressive New York groups, they just don't think he's one of them.
Right.
And he just is plagued this summer with scandal after scandal. Anyone who's tried to get an Amtrak or a subway out of New York Station.
Yeah, they have a little problem down there with the trains, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous that he and Bill de Blasio are engaged in this game of finger pointing, and now I saw yesterday that their staff have actually taken to sort of openly warring with each other over whose responsibility it is to fix the subway system, even though it is clearly the governor's responsibility as he appoints the majority of the MTA members. So, you know, he has this disaster in Penn Station right now. And what's coming in 2018, a special gift that's coming in 2018 for Andrew Cuomo, that we have the corruption trials of the Buffalo Billions. So these are close aides of Governor Cuomo that have been implicated in this scandal. And with Cuomo, I mean, he's someone who doesn't want to see on the front page of every single newspaper the top headline being the trial starting for close, ex-Cuomo aide. So he definitely, and look, guy has a $25 million war chest.
He's also hired a bunch of Hillary Clinton staffers as well, put them on the public payroll and given them like fake jobs.
Yeah, dubious positions. I mean, these sort of vague titles, and it's like, did that person really do that job? I'm not really sure. Yeah, I mean, he's very much gearing up for a run, and we started back in August. We started our Andrew Cuomo initiative, similar to the Elizabeth Warren initiative, where we're really going to be taking a serious look at him and what he's doing.
You'll have plenty to do there. We're talking with Alex Smith of the America Rising PAC. Again, if you want to get in a question, you can shoot us a text at 617-286-5633. That's 617-286-5633. Our phone number, if you want to call, is 617-619-6400. Alex, I wanted to get into one other thing too, which is, before we go, which is I think is important, but it's really below the radar right now here and around the country, which is the upcoming corruption trial of New Jersey Senator Menendez.
I totally agree. I mean, this is very much an under the radar story right now.
And tell us why it's so important.
So, if Senator Menendez has to resign from the Senate, let's just say
if he should be convicted.
If he should be convicted, or potentially he cuts a deal with federal prosecutors whereby he resigns his Senate seat, and that Senate seat is now vacant. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, there is a Republican governor.
Right. Hello,
in New Jersey,
Chris Christie. Right.
Hello, Chris Christie, who is very much an ally of Donald Trump, and I think would likely pick someone friendly to fill out that term. And so, of course, as the president is looking to run up, some victories on key issues like tax reform and health care and infrastructure, getting closer to 60 votes is imperative to stop the Democratic obstruction that's currently taking place in the Senate. And so I think that this will be really interesting to watch, and not only just because of the possible consequences of him having to resign his Senate seat, but for the Democrats that now have to go on record and state their position about whether or not he should resign. And there was a great New York Times article out the other day where there were several Democrats who went on record basically saying if he's a convicted felon, he should stay in the United States Senate.
Of course. Well, they'll do anything to keep him there because they need that one vote. That one Democratic vote is so critical in the Senate right now.
It's so critical, and
that's unbelievable to me that they're still saying he should stay in the Senate even if he's convicted. I mean, I've never heard of that Maybe in Massachusetts that has happened. I'm sure it has happened at some point, but it's crazy and shows you how important it is, really, that one vote that they have.
It is pretty unbelievable. And if you watched Morning Joe this morning, Senator Ben Cardin was on. And, we've been waiting for this question to pop here at America Rising in the mainstream media. We've been following it.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been waiting for the networks to pick it up and to really start running with it. And finally, a Democratic senator gets a question on it. And he just completely dodges. I mean, this is this is like world-class spin here. So,
right. Yeah, I'm sure they did. That's the last thing they want to talk about right now is a corruption trial.
They want to run away from it. And it kind of reminds me of the old sort of divisive question that had been asked of Democrats lately, which is who is the leader of the Democratic Party? And we see all these Democratic, representatives on TV, on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News that are just running away from the question. And probably my favorite was Representative Dingell of Michigan, who, when she was asked the question of who the Democratic Party leader was, just said, "Why am I talking about this?"
Classic.
In
That's
sort of
classic.
like exasperation. And so, it's been kind of fun to watch them squirm under the tough glare of these questions. And
Alex, we're talking to Alex Smith of America Rising PAC. You're also very closely following the midterm races, which are, besides 2020, is coming right around the corner. We have a race, obviously, here in Massachusetts. But you mentioned, most people, I think, would assume it's going to be a very tough year for Republicans because of Donald Trump and his unpopularity. Obviously, Democrats are going to do anything they can to link the Republicans to Donald Trump and try to go off that. And in the House, that is the case, I think, where the Republicans could probably lose a lot of seats. But you talked about earlier about the Senate actually looks pretty good right now, or the potential for Republicans to pick up seats.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can look at elections two ways. I think you could look at them as referenda, or you can look at them as choices. And to the extent that we can define at America Rising these candidates as a choice between two individuals that you have more information about than you would have normally, that's what our goal is. And, someone like, I would say, it's not just these 10 Trump state Democrats, as we call them. Even someone like Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts, I think, under the right circumstances, could face some trouble. Don't forget,
maybe a little, but yeah, I don't see it happening at this point. But there are some decent candidates out there, Republican candidates that are giving it a go.
Well, look, I mean, obviously, Massachusetts is a very liberal state, but and she has an $11 million war chest, only 20% of which was raised from Massachusetts, I might add. But she, if you look at the 2012 elections, this was a presidential year, okay? This was a big presidential year. President Obama won in a big way, and she ran 16 points behind him. And not only did she run 16 points behind him in Massachusetts, she also fell behind him with independents and self-described moderates.
Right.
So this is a state where you have over 50% independents. And I think that her lurch to the left, and not just the lurch to the left, but the focus on national ambitions rather than those of Massachusetts could be a real problem for her. She's no Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy was the lead sponsor on 300 bills in his time in the Senate. Elizabeth Warren has only had one. She is a person who, has kind of made a brand for herself. If you look at her online store, you can find "Nevertheless, she persisted" merchandise.
Right. Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of things you can buy Elizabeth Warren related.
Yeah.
But she is. Go ahead.
Not only is there no mention of Massachusetts on that online store, the credit card processing company, as it turns out, is Canadian. So she, this is a person that I think it really just does expose sort of her hypocrisy on things. She's selling the pink hat with "Nevertheless, she persisted."
Mm-hmm.
Well, she kind of took that from grassroots activists who make that hat on Etsy for $10 or $10 or $15 cheaper than she sells it on her site for. So this is a person who I think is desperately trying to not just claim the liberal mantle on things, but to brand it as her own in sort of a selfish and myopic way.
Although, in her defense, I think she's going to be a formidable opponent. I think that's why your group is focused on her so much, because of the possibility, or I don't know if that's a likelihood at this point, but the strong possibility that she could be the nominee. And I would not underestimate her popularity around the country, because she really is still a national phenomenon.
She does. Look, she can, bring out the liberal wing of the party. But I think that what the country showed us in 2016 is that they're beyond dogma. They're beyond a list of certain prescriptions that have to be met and litmus tests that have to be met in order to sort of be the favored candidate. And I think with Elizabeth Warren, what they're going to find is that she has this adherence to an extreme ideology that really just doesn't line up with the rest of the country.
We've been talking to Alex Smith of the America Rising PAC. Alex, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be talking to you throughout the campaign, because no one's keeping a closer eye on these upcoming elections than your group. And if you have some good dirt, send it our way.
Anytime, Joe.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to be coming right back. I'm going to be telling you what I did